To learn everything about the history, creation, and use of atomic bombs in World War II, read my book, The Atom as a Weapon, which is available on Amazon and also at the WeClap store. If you want to buy this copy here, autographed by me for you, just send an email to saladagera@gmail.com with your zip code so I can calculate the shipping. Embraer and the Brazilian aeronautics industry are quite likely to take a very important step in the history of their transport aircraft. KC-390, the largest military aircraft ever designed and manufactured in Brazil. Do you know why? Because it is a finalist in an Indian competition, which is actually quite large and could be decided in the coming months. So, if you're not up to date on this story today, I'm going to tell you everything. Stay tuned. The Indian Air Force, which is one of the main air forces in Asia, launched a program called MTA, or Medium Transport Aircraft, Medium Transport Aircraft, or Medium Transport Plane. It's a program that plans for the purchase of 60 new medium-sized cargo planes for the Indian Air Force. 60 cargo planes is quite a large number, okay? And today, guys, the KC-390 from Embraer has about between 40 and 50 firm orders, real firm orders, from various countries and also from Brazil, who have already purchased the model. If it wins this competition, it could finally surpass the magic mark of 100 aircraft ordered. So, that's very important, right? It's a milestone, of course, that's psychological, but it does a lot of good for our industry, for the aircraft, and also, in general, here for Brazil. 100 KC-390 aircraft firmly ordered. Can you imagine that? Do you know why the KC-390 has a real chance? Because this process was designed to meet the demands of intra-theater transport, meaning right there in India itself, in the Indian subcontinent, for fast, short-notice transport of large volumes. This includes armored vehicles, as we will see, okay? But if you look at the map of India, it has several problematic neighbors on its northern border. Its northern border is characterized by mountainous terrain. It's the world's worst mountainous terrain because the Himalayas are there, right? And because of that, those Indian transport planes have to be optimized to operate on austere runways, right? Unpaved runways or short runways, exactly what the KC-390 was designed to do, right? What is the KC-390, or what is this new Indian transport aircraft supposed to replace? It is supposed to replace a very large fleet of 105 aircraft made up of Antonov 32 aircraft. It's a Soviet twin-engine transport aircraft from the late 1970s. The first prototype is from 1979, I believe. Production of this model began in 1982. It peaked at the end of the 1980s. And it dragged on until 2012, when the Ukrainians finally ended the production of this aircraft, right? The Indians are the biggest users of this aircraft. It can carry 6,700 kilos of cargo. It has the ability to operate on short and poorly prepared runways, which makes it a very useful model for the Indian Air Force. But it has a rather limited cargo capacity for the type of requirements the Indians have today. And it's also an old aircraft that's suffering from a lack of spare parts on the market, especially because the situation of the war in Ukraine doesn't help the Indians at all to maintain a fleet of more than 100 aircraft in high demand. So they need to be replaced. And this replacement has now become urgent with the new border problems that India has been facing. This new aircraft should also take over some functions of the heavier transport fleet, Ilyushin Il-76, which the Indians also operate. These are 4-engine jet aircraft, meaning they have 4 jet engines, which gives them a much greater cargo capacity. And therefore, These new aircraft should also share tasks with that plane there, although it's not a process meant to replace that larger aircraft. How did this whole story start? This whole story actually begins back in 2001 when India, in partnership with Russia, created a program also called MTA. But in reality, it wasn't medium, it was multi-role. Multi-role means multi-purpose. So it would be a multi-purpose transport aircraft. And this partnership with Russia, at the time, it took shape with the proposal for the joint development of a twin-engine jet aircraft with a capacity of about 20 tons of cargo. Just look at it, the Ilyushin 214. The Ilyushin 214 looked a lot like what we see today in the Embraer KC-390. You can see that the two look quite similar, but those political and diplomatic problems from the early 2000s until the mid-2010s led the Indians to give up on this partnership with the Russians in 2016. And from 2017 on, the Russians did a rebranding, gave the project a new look, and named it the Ilyushin 276, and making it clear to the whole world that now it was an exclusive Russian project. And to this day, there isn't even a finished prototype of this project, right? Some sources indicate that this year we will see the first flight of Ilyushin 276. However, I couldn't find any more information about this. Well, in 2022 then, India started the first inquiries, the RFIs, Request for Information. I mean, the first actual inquiries, requests for information for a process to purchase new medium-sized transport aircraft, right? And of course, an announcement of this scale to replace the medium-range aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Anyone with a moderate knowledge about this subject will already realize that it's a big contract, right? Because the Antonov fleet totals more than 100 units. So, a lot of people started to pay attention to this process starting in India. One of the companies that really took notice was Embraer itself, which in the following year then took the KC-390 to India in 2023 and held a demonstration day for the KC-390 for several Indian authorities, as well as Indian industrial representatives. And that event was very well attended there in New Delhi, right? So, the KC-390 visited India, left a very good impression there, and came back here. Until new developments were finalized, right? And what happened on October 17, 2025? It was announced that Embraer formalized a partnership with the Mahindra Group, which is an Indian industrial group. October 17, pay attention to the date, right? There was still no position, no news from the Indian government regarding the competition. However, Mahindra came to Brazil and signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Embraer to establish this partnership. Interestingly, on November 7th, just a few days later, the Ministry of Defense of India, right? On November 7th, 2025, they announced that the process will really begin. The process of purchasing the planes, right? It's going to start, and it will, the requirements, right? Everything these aircraft must have would be announced in the following months. So Embraer did really well in that timeline, right? A few days before the Ministry of Defense of India formally announced that the program would happen, it signed a partnership with an Indian company, right? And then, guys, what happens next is that on March 3rd, 2026, so last month, right? A little over a month ago, the Ministry of Defense of India formalized and announced that the competition is open and we have $12 billion. $12 billion to buy and renew our fleet of medium cargo planes with 60 new aircraft. But India is at a stage where it no longer wants to make off-the-shelf purchases, right? Off the shelf is a term that means buying something straight off the shelf. In other words, I don't just want to buy 60 planes. I want to buy and manufacture them, right? They call this buy and make, literally buy and make. So they want 12 planes that are manufactured in the country of origin and come ready, but the other 48 planes have to be manufactured in India. And therefore, Embraer, not only with this partnership with Mahindra, has already announced that, yes, it is ready to set up an assembly line for the KC-390 in India, right? In the case of the Indian competition, I believe that at this moment it's the C-390, not the KC-390, because the C-390 would be a transport-only version. The KC-390 includes aerial refueling capabilities. Up to this point, it's the C-390, okay? So Embraer also announced that it would open a maintenance center in India, an aircraft maintenance center, okay? So when you open a maintenance center, you extend all the maintenance capabilities to that country, even if you don't have that aircraft there, right? Because it's clear to everyone that India is at one end of the globe and Brazil is at the other, right? The distance is very large. So it gives the Indian authorities peace of mind to have all this support infrastructure right there, right? So now we have to talk about the competitors in this process. Russia, which has its defense sector heavily committed, really tied up with internal demands, right? Because of the war with Ukraine, it announced that it would like to once again offer India the possibility of becoming a partner in the Ilyushin 276. But the Indians, right? It seems they didn't put much trust in this Russian proposal because that would mean having to develop a new aircraft from scratch. In other words, this new Indian medium cargo plane would only be ready in about 10 years. So the Indians are much more interested in buying aircraft that already exist, that are certified and ready to be used. Therefore, that leaves three serious competitors. The first of them is the Airbus A400M Atlas. As the name suggests, it's a European aircraft from the European Aviation Consortium. The second is the Lockheed C-130J Super Hercules, an American aircraft, an evolution of the traditional Hercules 250, a 4-engine turboprop. And finally, the Embraer KC or C-390 Millennium, which is a Brazilian twin-jet aircraft, the most modern of the three. As you'll see, it's the option that best fits what the Indians want. Why do I say this? Because the A400M Atlas, which I actually saw for the first time last year, during our expedition to Normandy, which we will do again next year, together with the Le Bourget Air Show. So we were there at Le Bourget last year, and we saw the A400 up close, man. And it's impressive. It's a beautiful plane up close, really. Wow, those 4 engines, that high wing, that downward angle. It's beautiful. The plane is beautiful, okay? But it's a plane that meets European needs. It meets the needs of the European members of NATO. And in the end, it's neither a tactical airlifter nor a strategic airlifter. A lot of people say that the tactical airlifter is the medium transport aircraft, and the strategic airlifter is the heavy transport aircraft. But it's not that easy to make that correlation in a straightforward way, okay? But a tactical airlifter, guys, is a plane that can move military assets within a theater of operations. And the concept of a theater of operations is closely related to regionalization, right? To a region or a continent. For example, Europe is a theater of operations, right? Africa is a theater of operations. South America is a theater of operations, and Oceania is a theater of operations. North America is a theater of operations, and so on. But if you look at a diagram like this one, you realize that the A400 doesn't reach, even though it's large and has 4 engines, it doesn't quite qualify as a strategic airlifter because it carries 30 tons, right? Which is a pretty interesting amount of cargo based on the statistics that say it can carry up to 37 tons, right? With 30 tons, it barely reaches North America departing from Paris. It barely makes it, you can see that. With 20 tons, it can at least reach a small part of it, okay? So it's a plane. It's a plane that, for those who don't need to do that, can be expensive to operate. It's an expensive plane to operate because, as you can see now too, the A400, it's between the Super Hercules and the KC-390 in size, and the C-17, which is a true strategic airlifter. So it's neither one thing nor the other, but it has operational costs equivalent to the C-17. So that's where a serious problem comes in for the Indians. Why? Because these planes are really going to be used. They're going to be used routinely. They're expected to be used routinely. So the hourly cost, the operational cost is an important factor. So that led to a lot of behind-the-scenes conversations with people telling us, making it pretty clear, or to suggest for those of us who are following the process that the A400 might actually already be out of the process. It's officially still in the running, but unofficially it might have already been ruled out. Because simply put, it's too heavy, it's too big for the requirements, and it's also too expensive to operate. So that leaves 2, the Super Hercules and the KC-390. The Super Hercules has the smallest cargo capacity of the 3. The Indians set up to 30 tons as the maximum cargo capacity, and the Super Hercules carries 20 tons. It also has the narrowest cargo hold of the 3. And it's a 4-engine plane as well. Again, it's a 4-engine aircraft, also a turboprop like the A400. But Lockheed already operates within the Indian Air Force. So there's the tradition factor. The tradition factor is very important. In addition to the American defense lobby, the American defense sector, which should not be underestimated.
Menosprezado.
So Lockheed, among the 3 competitors, benefits from the largest logistics support network already in place in India to operate the Hercules, which the Indian Air Force already operates. Right? So it has that point in its favor. It already has an established network on the ground. And it's also willing to manufacture this plane there in India because it has partnered with Tata Industries. You know very well that Tata is huge there in India. Finally, we have our Embraer KC-390 or C-390, which is a twin jet. It's a twin-engine aircraft. High-powered jet engines, but also efficient because they're very new models. So out of the 3 competitors, it's the one with the fewest engines, so it requires less engine maintenance. And the partnership with Mahindra ensures that it will be manufactured there the way the Indians want to. Because it's the most modern, and not just because of that, right, but also because it has already proven itself in operation in Brazil and other places around the world, it offers the best overall value. Lowest cost per flight hour, easier maintenance, and the onboard technology is truly state-of-the-art. I had this fantastic opportunity to get to know the KC-390 from the inside, also at the Le Bourget Air Show. I want to thank the Embraer team again for doing me this huge favor, right? Because it wasn't even press day. They let me board the plane. They let me get inside the plane. If you want to see it, there's the full video here on the channel. So, it's a plane that's been treated as the favorite because of the sales that have already been made, the proven track record, and the low operational cost. combined with more recent technology than the others, right? The Super Hercules is a great aircraft. It definitely is, but it's already a platform at its limit, right? An 80-year-old platform, well, not 80, but it's easily a 70-year-old platform. The original Hercules designs date back to the 1950s.
Então,
So there's one last factor, right, that the Indians are trying to match with the prerequisites, which is being able to carry their new light tank, right, which is the Zorawar that was introduced last year. And it's a vehicle that should weigh about 25 tons. 25 tons is almost the cargo limit of the KC-390, but it's within the KC-390's envelope. Therefore, this would be a key differentiator between the Super Hercules and our Embraer Millennium, right? The Indian government says the competition should be concluded in the next few months. So then we'll see for sure if Embraer will reach the magic mark of 100 planes sold, or if it'll have to wait for the next time. So tell me now, were you already following this competition? Do you think our KC-390 will win this competition in India, or will the Super Hercules take it? Tell us in the comments. If you like this video, share it with your friends, and also give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to War Room so you don't miss anything. I'll stop here. Thank you again for watching, and here's a big hug from War Room.